All right, so in the Pacific, we only had enough troops in the Pacific to contain the Japanese, so they sort of take advantage of this initially. They attack us in Guam, Wake, and the Philippines, and they also seize the ports of Hong Kong and British Malaya. Now, what happens in the Philippines is probably the most notable thing. It's a very long, drawn-out, hard battle in the Philippine jungles. General Douglas MacArthur is the American general in charge, and he is forced, because the battle is going poorly and Japan is winning, he is forced by FDR's administration to pull out of the Philippines and go to Australia and sort of command things from there. Eventually, the U.S. troops that were left had to surrender to the Japanese, and this is where it gets really ugly, because the Japanese forced the American and Filipino POWs, the prisoners of war, to go on what's called the Bataan Death March. The Bataan Death March was about 80 to 85 miles long, and it involved a lot of physical and emotional abuse and a lot of death right on the spot. Somewhere between 2,500 and 10,000 Filipinos died on this march. They're not sure how many. The number is very vast, I understand, but they're not sure how many, because a lot of the Filipinos may have escaped and blended into the population of the area. The Americans didn't have that choice. And somewhere between about 200 to 650 Americans died on this march. So not a lot of Americans, but enough that it really ticked us off. And the brutality of the march is also what ticked us off. Now, Midway and island hopping. So the Battle of Midway. Midway was really crucial to the Japanese because it was about 1,000 miles from Hawaii. What they could do there is they could put a bunch of planes and they could launch attacks on Hawaii without needing an aircraft carrier support group to go with them. So this was huge. The Battle of Midway is June of 1942. It lasts for about 3 days. Admiral Chester Nimitz is in charge, and it really is an air battle. There are several thousand airplanes involved in this, and the U.S. winds up winning the Battle of Midway. It was a huge air battle. We also win at Guadalcanal, we win at New Guinea, and we were able basically then, with this island hopping campaign of hopping from one island to the next to move westward, we were able to basically surround Japan and cut them off from all of their island support that they had because they controlled a lot of these places. Now in Europe, because this was our real concentration. German U-boats, this wolf pack that Hitler had essentially, German U-boats were responsible for the destruction of 500 merchant ships throughout the first couple of years of the war. They had hit, in 1942, they hit 111 merchant vessels in the Atlantic. 111 in 1 month. That was huge. By spring of 1943, however, the Allies had really defeated the German U-boats. They were basically done. We had sank enough of them that they couldn't recuperate. So now we turn to an air war. And you're talking about tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of planes involved in this air war, where there was a lot of dogfighting and these bombing runs that I mentioned with the Tuskegee guys. And that's what it turns into. We started to really break into German airspace and be able to lead some bombing runs on German munitions factories and German concentrations of the war effort. We did not go after civilian institutes, but rather munitions type places. Now in North Africa, the general in charge there for Germany, German Marshal Erwin Rommel, he was known as a Desert Fox, very sly, very cunning, very smart military general. He was a good strategist. He's able to push over into Egypt and take, and he's approaching the Suez Canal. If he had reached the Suez Canal successfully, he could have put a real damper on Allied efforts because of our shipping lanes that went through the Suez Canal. So it's up to British General Montgomery to stop him, and he does that at a place called El Alamein. And the Battle of El Alamein involves about 400,000 troops. He also has help from General Eisenhower in this, U.S. General Eisenhower, and they're able to push Germany back through Egypt, so they take Egypt back, and they're able to push them also back through Tunisia. So things are going pretty well in North Africa. So now the question is, what do we do next? Now that we have North Africa, what do we do? Well, the Soviets come into play here. And the Soviets are calling on the United States and the Allies to open up a second front in this war. Enough of playing this, hide-and-go-seek in North Africa. Can we get back to Europe, please, and get fighting there? Because we're trying our best to keep Germany at bay, and they've invaded us, and we're really trying to push them back, but we need help. And the USSR was really successful in pushing Germany back through all of the land that Germany had taken in the Soviet Union. Russia was able to push them back into Germany, into Poland, and regain the lands that Germany had taken originally. We were a little bit nervous about Russia, the Soviet Union, because we didn't know any repeats of World War I. We didn't want them pulling out early and settling a separate peace with Germany, just so they could save their own necks. So we kind of warned Stalin about this. Hey, don't do that again to us, because you really jerked us around last time. We don't want it to happen again. U.S. General Dwight Eisenhower, he's very helpful in North Africa, as I mentioned, but he's also going to push north. FDR and Winston Churchill get together in Casablanca, Morocco, and they make an agreement that, okay, once we're finished in North Africa, we need to head north, and let's do it by going through Sicily, which is this island that hangs off the boot of Italy. Let's go through Sicily and up through Italy from south to north, and Rome sits in the middle. So that was that deal. So they push north to Sicily, pretty brutal battle there, and then they enter Italy in the southern part of the boot. In 1943 is when they enter Italy. It's a long, drawn-out, hard process to get Italy to fall. They were really stubborn. But by June 4th of 1944, Rome finally capitulates. What's important about that date? 2 days before D-Day. So, now, what's D-Day? Well, the big three are going to meet in Tehran, Iran. This is one of a couple of conferences that they're going to have. They're going to have 3 in total, but the players are going to change by the third one. So the big three are going to meet in Tehran. It's going to be FDR, Joseph Stalin, and Winston Churchill. And they get together to decide what's next. What do we do with Europe? How are we going to invade? What's the plan? So they decide on a simultaneous attack. Russia will attack from the east. The Allies will attack from the west, and will squeeze Germany together. How are the Allies going to get in there? Because we didn't have a presence in Europe yet. So we're going to do a cross-channel invasion of France. We're going to go from Great Britain, where the forces are going to be amassed, into France to the south. And we're going to cross over the English Channel, which is only a couple dozen miles. And we're going to invade and land at a place called Normandy, France, because it was the least fortified of Germany's outposts in France. It was still pretty heavily fortified. We took on a lot of casualties doing this. It was brutal. Go watch Saving Private Ryan. So this is going to be known as D-Day, okay? It's going to happen in Normandy. It's going to be June 6th, 1944, okay? Now, by August of 1944, we had recaptured France. So what we did was we sent in these forces by boat into Normandy, all these ground forces, right? And they invade over the beaches and stuff at Normandy. And then behind German lines, what we did was we dropped paratroopers. And the guys with the parachutes, they come down and they just fan out across France, and were able to retake France by August of 1944. Now, also in 1944, this is, we have these things called elections every 4 years. I keep mentioning those. But we have a big presidential election in 1944. And FDR, the Democrats are going to put FDR up again. Okay, fine. He's winning. He's in the war. We're doing well. Everything's great, hunky-dory. Things seem to be going swimmingly for us, all right, other than the fact that we're losing thousands of men. But FDR is put up again by the Democrats. The question here wasn't who to put up for the Democrats. The question was, who do we put up as the vice president? Because the vice president that he had was very controversial. So they let go of him, and they bring in this guy named Harry Truman. Who? He's a senator from Missouri. He's a farmer. He's a plain guy, not college educated. This is a plain old man, okay? But here's the point. FDR was even older, and death was upon him. So nobody was really sure how long FDR was going to make it. He had had some health issues. So we needed a solid vice president, and that would be Truman. The Republicans are going to run an educator from New York named Thomas Dewey, okay, again. Dewey does okay here. It's probably one of FDR's worst showings. He wins by 3 million popular votes, which is not as many as he'd won by before. But Dewey makes some inroads, enough that in 1948, he's actually credited with a win for the presidency, even though it was a bad credit.